Hi everyone, Jess here from the Scrappy Sisters, and thank you for joining me for a Confessions of a Paper Addict design team layout. So in this layout, I am creating a bit of a mixed media background. I've got my thick, heavy white cardstock and my cheapo watercolor paints, and I am splodging on 4 different colors. These are going to be tone on tone, so this is going to be a color match to the collection I am using. This is the Kaiser Craft Finders Keepers. I had to think about that. Finders Keepers collection. It is a very old Kaiser Craft collection. I highly doubt you'd be able to find it now anymore. But I'd never used it yet. This is a kit that I had sitting on my shelf brand new, so I'm cranking it out for the very first time. So I've got 4 main colours I'm going to be using. There are more colours in the kit, but these are the 4 colours I'm going to be using, and that's obviously green and yellow, and I'm also going to be using a blue and a red. So I'm just splodging on the 4 main colours and then doing a little flick at the end as well, to let those colours splatter out across the page. And I'm doing it in this diagonal across the page feel. There's one thing I do when making this mixed media page that I would do differently for next time, and that would be to let this red dry before I do the last colour. Because I start to get a little bit of bleeding. For some reason, the green and the red didn't bleed too much, and maybe because they did have a little bit, the green had a tiny bit of time to dry before the red arrived, but the blue is coming straight on. So that is something that I would do differently next time, because you can see already just adding the water there, it's already starting to bleed. Now I'm mopping up with a little tissue some of the red that is running, but I am having trouble stopping the red and the blue bleeding together to make a purple. So I definitely would wait and let the red dry a little bit if I wasn't in such a hurry, or even pull out my heat gun and let the red dry just a little bit more before I came in with my blue. But I didn't do that this time. I did manage to work it out. It's pretty good. And I do know I'm obviously going to cover quite a large amount of this with my cut file and my photos and my ephemera and all that. But just in general, yeah, I would have let it dry more for next time. So I'm pulling it up to show you the flower that I am using. This is my cut file for the day. So I am using the Bended Petals cut file. Yes, Bended Petals. And I've showed you how I'm layering those up together. I've bent each of the petals, and then I've layered all 3 or 4 layers together. So I've got 2 of the larger size, 1 medium and 1 small, because in the little mini flower, I'm just using 1 medium and 1 small. So that's where the 2 larger sizes came from. So I probably cut this 8 times, the 1 cut file. So I filled my mat twice, if that makes sense. So I had 4x6 paper, and I put 4 sheets, the 4 different colors, into each corner of my mat, which made a full 12x12 piece of paper. And I cut all of the florals out once, and then I put it back through in a different paper, different configuration, and cut them again. So I cut the cut file 8 times, 2 in the green, 2 times in green, 2 times in yellow, 2 times in red, and 2 times in blue. And that was enough to build all of the flowers you can see on my page. I do hope that made sense. Please let me know if I haven't explained that to make sense to you. And so as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a tone-on-tone effect here. So I've got a little doily that came in the collection in each of the colors. I'm layering the petals, the flowers on top of each of the doilies, and then again I've got one matching piece of ephemera. It had a lot of text in this collection, so I decided to roll with it, and each piece of ephemera is quite text heavy, it all says a text. So I've popped those together, and this is the basic configuration of how my layout's going to go. So I've popped my photo up on foam, and I've matted my photo. I did that off camera because it was quite fiddly, because I used all the scraps from my 6x6 bead of paper. So the reason why the mats aren't full squares is because there was no full squares left. And I kind of just rolled with however neatly I could get it to sit around the photo was how it was matted. And yeah, I just did any form of like higgledy-piggledy squares all the way around in the same 4 colours. I'm using glue to stick all this down to, just because sometimes when sticking onto a mixed media background, it doesn't want to adhere that well when I use my double-sided tape, and I really wanted to make sure these stayed. I also thought they would be the best for making sure the flowers stayed, because they're not too bulky, but they are a tiny bit bulky, if that makes sense. I showed you how thick they were, and they weren't that thick, but they're also not completely flat. So I thought trying to stick them with double-sided tape might be a little bit of a challenge. I did also show you, I think, briefly when looking at the bended flowers, I actually got a little hole punch and punched out a hole in the matching colour and stuck one on the back and one on the front. Probably didn't need the one on the back, but just to help hold everything together. I found the one on the front was just a nice way to finish off the flower. You could have put it like a diamante or a enamel dot in the center. I actually thought about that and then forgot, and now I'm thinking about it again. I'm like, oh, maybe I should have put an enamel dot in the center. Oh well, too late now. But you could definitely do that and show me how awesome that looks and then make me regret not doing it. So popping on the rest of my beautiful ephemera and flowers, just making sure you can still read all of that text heavy ephemera, but that it's still sort of in and underneath, that it's popping out from between the flowers, because the flowers are sort of the feature here of the page. You can see what I meant earlier when I said I knew a little bit of bleeding between that red and blue wouldn't have really mattered because I'd planned on covering quite a bit. And there you can see already it's totally fine that there's a little bit of purple showing through. You hardly even notice at all. Once it was all dry as well, I forgot to mention, I actually splattered some colour Heidi Shine in gold on top of all the ephemera on top of all of the mixed media before I started any of my embellishing. I did that once it had dried. You can absolutely splatter your colour shine while your mixed media is still wet, but it gives the Heidi Shine a different effect. If your page is wet, the Heidi Shine sort of bleeds and it doesn't have a clean splot. It's still shiny and it's still gold and it's still beautiful, but it bleeds a little bit. And I wanted that crisp, round spot this time, so I let everything dry first. I'm a little bit behind what's happening on my page. I'm also using foam thickers. They came in black. And I didn't want them black, so I actually got out my embossing glue and my gold embossing powders, and I embossed the front of my foam thickers to make them gold. Now by doing that, the heat tool has sort of shrunk them a little bit, so I've just got them weighed down by a thick Cookery the Australian way there, just to sort of flatten it out now that it's being glued onto my page. I've caught up with what's happening, I'm also popping some coloured thread in and underneath all the different flowers in matching tone-ish. I didn't have any green or yellow, so I used white, but I did have red, or not red, I have this coral colour, but once you mix it all up and put it in under the flower, it looks matching enough, and blue, I've got blue as well. So yes, those thickers there that you can see, the Love Today, they were a black foam that I used my embossing powders and my heat gun and all of that to emboss the front of them. It kind of gives that smooth finish to it. You have to be a little bit careful. They can crinkle a bit, but not too bad. You'll see in the close-ups it works really, really well. So I'm just popping some glue in and under and then using my scissors to push the thread in on top of all the glue. Actually, in that case, I pushed the thread in first, so there you have it. Also, off camera, I do the exact same process with a gold thread. I did that off camera because the gold thread was being super stubborn, and it was actually taking me a really long time to get the gold thread to bunch and go in and under, so I didn't show you that process. So I have left my thickers to dry and to flatten out. And now I'm going to do a little bit of color matching with my enamel dots. Did I mention that I stitched around the border? I did that right back at the start. Apologies if I didn't mention that. So I'm just color matching here the enamel dots. So yellow to yellow, blue to blue, red to red, just to finish off my page. I like to hide those super big ones a little bit in and under because I don't feel like they're a little bit too big for the page. So I like to sort of tuck them in and under. And then I am just about done. And I will pull you in for some close-up photographs as well, just so you can see a little bit better how this layout has turned out. I'm super thrilled with the way these bended petals came together. I think it looks really gorgeous. And I'm really excited to give them another try. I was really happy with the end result. So they were in the May release, by the way. They're a new release now. So here we are coming in for some close-ups, and you'll be able to get a better feel of how everything looks. So I've got, as you can see the texture that pops out from underneath there with having that thread. You can sort of see the pops of gold that flick out from in between the gold thread as well. You can see the way I stitched on some of the petals. I didn't mention that, apologies. And how they're all got that little bend fold there as well. Thank you so much for watching, and happy scrapping.